Next, let's talk about graphs. For the graph section, I also recommend that you use OY or O3 mini high. In other words, only pure math uses O3 mini. As long as it involves graphs, figures, or reasoning, I strongly suggest you use O3 mini high or OUI. Of course, after you subscribe, each of these two options gives you 50 users per day. So that should be more than enough because you won't review every single question. You only review the ones you got wrong or are unsure about. Now, let me talk about which of these two models I think is more suitable. Of course, O3 mini high is more suitable because if you look at the same question, for example, like this one, you can see its standard answer is 3 C rods, right? If you use UN, there's a chance it might misidentify them, so it could get the answer wrong. For example, here it explains it as something else. Explaining it as 3 rods, B is O. Although UN is also quite powerful, it still has a certain error rate. Let's take a look at the performance of GPT-O3 Mini. You can see that when it comes to math-related questions, look, O3 Mini compared to OI, its capability is even a bit higher. Now, you might ask, what about O3 Mini Media? Just now, we used O3 Mini Media. So why do I say that for math today? This one is enough, because GMAT level math and competition level math are not the same. Competition level math is truly very difficult. Olympiad level math is really about the essence of the Olympiad, but GMAT level math isn't that. Extreme using these types of questions is enough. However, if we need to deal with images, I would recommend using high because images are relatively more complex. So when using them, between these two, of course, you should choose this one first, then choose the other. For example, in the same question we just mentioned, this question has 3 CMARs, and this is O3 mini high. If you use UN, it turns into 3 geometric progressions, and you'll get the wrong answer. But if you use O3 mini high, you'll get the correct answer. Now, you might ask, if it gets it wrong, does that mean it's unreliable? I still want to remind you of one thing for the future. Why do you want to test it? If it gets it wrong, so be it. It's not going to take the exam for you. So what you should do isn't to test it, but rather to tell it. You got it wrong. Please check your reasoning again. When it reviews its reasoning, it will correct its thought process. Then you can learn from this corrected approach. In other words, don't take a gloating attitude, like, haha, you made a mistake, so you're terrible. Don't look at it that way. Instead, your attitude should be, oh, you made a mistake, but let me help you fix it. All right, think it through again. Once you thought it through correctly, then I'll use that to learn. Approach it from this perspective, not from a standpoint of competing against the AI. So of course, I still recommend that you prioritize using O3 mini high. As you can see here, you can also upload images in this tool. Uploading images is actually very convenient. For example, let me give you an example. You see, we can use it directly. I'm not sure if your computer has this feature, but if you're using a Mac, there are some shortcuts that let you take screenshots. And with these screenshots, you don't even need to save them as image files. You can just use the clipboard and paste them directly. So I just cut and paste it like that. And usually when I take a screenshot, I only capture the image part. If it's text, I'll just paste the text directly whenever possible, because sometimes the text recognition isn't perfect and can make mistakes. So only when I feel that something really can't be converted into text will I take a screenshot of it. But as long as something can be converted into text, I'll try my best to preserve the original appearance of the text. Otherwise, if the text recognition makes a mistake, it just wastes our time in our conversation. So think about it. Once we put it in, we can use what we just talked about. The most basic thing is to use an explanatory approach. Now that we've seen a good way to solve the problem, let's look at how we can find an even faster solution path. You'll notice here that I'll make a slight adjustment as well. In chart-based questions, besides plugging in numbers, there's actually another feature you can visually inspect the assets. For example, if this question is asking for the median, all we need to do is find the 17th value. For the 17th value, we can quickly count directly, starting from the middle, right? Or if it's a table question like this, and we're asked to find the average first. So what can we do? We can look at where the data is most densely distributed, and we can use visual estimation or numerical estimation. That's why I've made a slight adjustment here compared to pure mathematics, because in pure math, you can't rely on visual estimation. But if it's a chart-based question, it's much easier if I can visually estimate. For example, as you can see, they teach us that if we want to estimate visually, we can roughly count where the 17th data point is. And by counting the 16 points to the left or the 16 to the right, we can quickly find out where the median of the 17 data points is. And if we're calculating the average, we don't necessarily have to actually add up all the numbers. We can just look at it. For example, if the question asks us among A, B, and C, which are the black, blue, and white dots, which one has the lowest average, we don't need to add up every single number. We can just roughly observe their distribution. We can see which one is relatively higher and which one is relatively lower, and use this method to solve the problem as well. As long as you give the right instructions that fit the exam setting and your requirements or your own unique way of solving problems, it will provide you with the best method. Of course, the instructions we just mentioned earlier also apply here, so I won't repeat them. It will still help you identify the key mathematical concepts being tested in this question. Or, for example, what features should you look for in future questions to easily find a median? Things like visually simple addition, group characteristics, and so on. If a problem has these traits, this method would be suitable for you. So what if it's a table question? For example, with this kind of table question, I would suggest that if you can copy and paste the table, you can actually paste it just like that. Even though when we humans look at it, it might seem a bit misaligned for AI, it can automatically organize it. There's no problem at all. AI has automatic data recognition and clarification functions. So after you paste the table, as long as there aren't any extra or missing numbers in the middle and the order of the positions is still correct, it will automatically recognize it as a table. You can just paste it directly. But what if you want to use an image? As for the functionality, the principle is that you should only use images if it truly cannot be converted into text. Whenever it can be turned into text, it's better to put it up as text exactly as it is, because images that are actually text can still pose certain problems for AI. Now, you can see that in this question, a problem arises. For example, it explains that this is support. But in fact, if you look at the answer to this question, that's not the case. Side, the last answer to this question is problematic. It should be not supported. Let's take a look at what this question looks like. The question says that these companies are doing this for those relatively disadvantaged groups, specifically small and medium-sized enterprises. They design websites for those disadvantaged groups. These are people who are running businesses but don't have a website, which is really unfortunate. So they help them by designing websites. And at the same time, they conducted a survey to see how having a website benefits them. There are 4 groups. One is Latino, one is African American, and another is Asian. And the other group is Native Americans. For example, the website can help them expand their customer base, it can help them improve communication, and it can help increase customer satisfaction. Then they conducted a survey to see the proportions in these areas. Now, the question is asking us, for the following 3 conclusions, if the information in the article can support them, then choose supported. If not, then it's not supporting. Now, let's take a look. Here it says, here comes the question. It says that among all the respondents, only a small portion were concerned about losing their market share. So let's take a look at what the original reasoning was. The original reasoning was that the table mentioned maintaining market share. And in this section, it's about 6%, 6%, 4%, 6%. So he thought, yes, it's really just 6%, 4%, 4%, 6%, only a very small number. So he thought this option should be supported. But actually, as humans, we can immediately see that this is wrong. Why? Because what the passage talks about are the benefits, saying that maintaining market share is at 6%, 6%, 4%, and 6%. That's the focus. But this option is talking about losing market share. Losing market share and maintaining market share are not the same thing. Saying that 6% of people care about maintaining market share doesn't mean that 6% are talking about losing market share. I like having market share. It doesn't mean I'm afraid of losing it. So logically, you can't infer the opposite. The article says that 6% of people think the benefit is maintaining market share. But the option here talks about losing market share. And the article doesn't mention anything about losing market share. The logic just equates the two. At this point, there's no point in blaming the AI. Criticizing it is meaningless. You should tell it that this part is not supported and ask it to re-explain whether there was an error in its reasoning. After it re-evaluates its reasoning, we'll see that it directly points out its own problem. Maintaining market share is not the same as worrying about losing market share. The wording is clearly different. Sometimes it will notice its own mistake, but other times it won't. Later on, he just knocked the city out, right? At this point, the mediator, Dustin, will help you. I'll personally use language to help you solve it. In fact, we can even handle graph-related questions. Besides the graph and table examples we just demonstrated, that is, questions involving charts and tables. There's another type, which is Ms. In these multi-analysis questions, there are both charts and tables. The biggest feature of these multi-analysis questions is that they don't just have a single passage. They include text along with charts and tables. And there are also several pages to navigate. Now, there's no problem when it's just a single page, but the biggest challenge we face in the exam, especially with MS, is how we can efficiently absorb information, right? You can't spend so long reading all 3 pages that it's dark outside by the time you're done, or finish reading 1 page, jump to the next, and suddenly get brain fog, not even knowing what the next page means. At times like this, you can see that we can use this command. How can I quickly absorb these 3 pieces of information within 1.5 to 2 minutes? I paste all the materials for it and ask if there's a recommended reading order and key points to focus on. You see, it gives you a suggested reading sequence, like which parts to read first and what to pay attention to, then what to focus on next, and so on. But of course, the way we humans approach exams might be different. For example, if you've taken intermediate courses, you'll notice that the recommended approach for dusting isn't to read everything in order because our reading ability isn't that strong. My recommendation is always to start by reading the question stem and the answer choices. For the first question, read the question stem and the answer choices. Then, based on the question stem and answer choices, look at the relevant sections of the passage. Okay, at this point, we can adjust our instructions accordingly. For example, as we just mentioned, the usual recommended approach is to first read the question stem and answer choices, then use the clues provided by the answer choices to go back and find the relevant sections. So here, I directly set it up like this. If we adjust the order to first look at the content of the question and then use the clues from the question to go back and read the information in the images, can you help me find the shortest and most efficient reading method? And since this is a task for humans, they will first do one thing: analyze what value the question itself requires, like finding A plus B. Then they will analyze which pages clearly provide A plus B. This one doesn't have a plus B, that one does have a plus B. If this page doesn't have the number for A plus B, then we immediately know to start working from the second page if it's an ordered field, because we're worried that some details might be missed. We'll go back to check the original meaning of the first text. But mainly we use the A plus B from the second page to solve the problem. And as you can see in this page division, it's very clear that there's no mention at all of the A plus B scenario, so it can be skipped. So you see their problem-solving process is the same as ours. They emphasize that what needs to be looked at is the combined revenue of companies A and B. Here, A and B are not listed at all, but here they are listed. So this is the one we mainly focus on. But what happens after adding them together? He says there might be some details missing from the question, and if he has time, he'll come back to check. It mentions A and B, but there are no numerical values on this purely textual page, which helps avoid traps. You see, this is exactly the same as the standard problem-solving process we humans use. It seems like, look, here he demonstrates this question once again. He also asks it to first analyze the content of the statement, then focus on the statement. And what's emphasized here is the year. So at this point, you'll know that the place you need to go back and locate must include the year, which is where the total revenue and RNA table is. Here, the statement mentions how many years. So we confirm that we can't just rely on this part. This part gives us the years, and that part also gives us the years. So these two tables need to be combined to make a judgment, right? This way, you can see that it explains how to judge each statement and which tables you can use to make that judgment. Look, the final answer you get, sufficient, insufficient, insufficient, they are correct ones. And it's okay if some are incorrect. You can just tell them that the answer for this part is different and ask them to check the process again. You can even tell them what kind of test taker you are. For example, you might say you're a test taker who really doesn't like looking at charts, or that your reading ability isn't very strong. What would you suggest? I read first. When you're stuck, this approach helps you learn how to effectively absorb information in a very customized way. You're not just following a single method instead. Everyone can tailor their approach based on their own characteristics and the techniques you've learned in class to personalize your learning and make adjustments. Also, you can do customized practice based on the mistakes you've made. But here's a reminder, when it comes to graphs and tables, since they involve images, the system currently can't generate variant questions for you. For now, it can't, for example, recreate a bar chart, a column chart, or some unusual line graph for you. It can't do that either. But at the very least, what we can achieve here is to display the flow of information and clearly show your thought process. Of course, there's something else you can do as well. While working through these problems, you can first record your own reasoning process. Then you can compare it with the sample thought process provided and see exactly where the differences lie between your approach and theirs. This is definitely a very effective method. Okay, so let's review what we've covered today and summarize a few key takeaways. First, you just saw a variety of creative prompts, different ways to activate AI. All of these can help you improve the efficiency of your review process. Why can they make your review process more efficient? Because the least efficient way to review is this. You simply answer the question, get it right or wrong, and just look at the solution, that's all. A more effective way to review is to reflect on why you answered the way you did, and to ensure you don't make the same mistake in the future. Practice similar problems, and identify related concepts. And now, with the latest AI, after proper tuning, it can even help you do things like we just discussed, such as following alternative problem-solving processes and adjusting the approach to fit your needs, just like what a human could do during an exam. Organize concepts and create variant problems. Connect these concepts to similar questions. Hey, so overall, it can help you make significant progress.